the reality of living under apartheid and under occupation started not yesterday, it started in 1948. And everything that happens today is a result of 1948. It's not a result of anything that happens in the recent history. It's 75 years of the Palestinians being ethnically cleansed from Palestine, the Palestinians being kicked out, exiled, living as refugees around the world. And for me, the message was yes, that this is life under apartheid, and also the main thing that I wanted to show is that we also have our tools of resilience, and there's so much ways to heal. That we are also, there's colonialism and occupation not only of the body physically, but there's also colonialism and occupation on the modalities on healing, so that we can never be free. So I wanted to also share that with people.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. And when you say the occupation on the modality, can you explain a bit more? What does that mean? I personally did not understand that.
So the colonizers doesn't only take your land and take your resources, but they also entrench their ideology and their beliefs on you. They enforce it on us. So
Hmm.
when I was paralyzed, the only, you go to a hospital, you get the Western
Mm-hmm.
medicine. If you go to anywhere in the world, you go into the hospitals, and you are all taught this. We are all taught the same kind of medicine. And this is the
Yeah.
medicine of the Western man. This is the medicine that comes from Europe and the colonizers. It's based on Arab science, and it's based on the discoveries of the Arabs from ancient years that they've
Yeah.
also appropriated. And they say that
Mm-hmm.
the first person who created, who discovered gravity was, the Europeans. The first person, when in the reality, it's all stolen books that they took from the Arabs, because we were colonizers as well as Arabs, and when we went into Europe, we disseminated our books and our knowledge, and they took it and they appropriated it. So the idea that we are only offered this kind of medicine is absurd to me, because the whole way that the colonizer looks at you is they look at humans as commodities. In the
Hmm.
capitalist industry, in the colonialist industry, we are just consumers. Not only the people they colonize, but their own people are all just cash money and customers. The
Yeah.
pharmaceutical industries is all about making money. There's no weighing in for the actual care of people and humans, and how you live is not really the. I know that many doctors go into the medicine because they want to help people, but what's offered to them in school as education is a Western modality, which separates the mind body from each other. They are taught that we are just physical entities, and you can, your arm's broken, tack, 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 fix it, cut it. There's a cancer, you take it out. They don't deal with how the emotions affect the body, how the trauma sits in the body, where it sits in the body. That we are also made of electricity. There's energy that moves within us, that we are
Hmm.
beings that are much stronger than just physical flesh. At the end of the day, um, we believe in, especially in what I believe in, is that we have energy. Whether you are an atheist, then you believe in energy. If you are a Muslim, then you believe that there's a soul, there's a spirit within you that's connected to the divine. If you're a
Hmm.
naturalist, then you're also coming from Mother Earth, and there's the vibration that comes. So if you look at it from anyways, we're not only this physical body. So the separation of this is how they control the control you, and it's also how the colonialists enable also the mass murder genocides to occur. This is where the supremacy comes from, because some people can be supreme to others. It's not that we are all equal to each other and that we belong to the same and we come from the same place, which is source. We are all carrying a divine within us, and if you murder life, you're
Mm-hmm.
murdering the sanctity of all.
Mm-hmm.
So this Western modality treats us like this, a piece of meat. And when they talk about mental health, we also have to all be. Now it's shifting. Yani, with people, with amazing doctors like Dr. Gabor Mate, with
Mm-hmm.
Peter Levine talking about somatics, with amazing, yani, you have, if you go back into history pre-colonization, Islamic psychology is also, many of the Western ways of thinking of therapy come from Islamic psychology, and we
Hmm.
have so many tools that are available to us. There are, if you look at the Tibetans and the knowledge that they had and the healing that they have, if you look at the Indian, if there's so much there, ancestral knowledge for healing, and this is how civilizations have survived until today. If it's all up, if we're all relying on Western medicine, we are all on pills. And you can see in the Western societies that everybody is on pills. There's some kind of a pill that you need to take in order to survive. And the medicine is always something outside of you, and it comes from people who, it comes from an industry. Whereas the natural remedies, the herbal remedies, get pushed to the side as alternative. Everything that is not sold by the white man, by the machine, is alternative.
Everything you say is so true, and I don't understand how, let's say, the Zionists can't see that by causing all this harm to not only the people there, the animals, the nature, the olive trees, on your holy land, you're desecrating the land, and you can't replace it. It doesn't come back like that. I don't know.
Because they're not connected to the land. They're destroying. This is the, yani, for us, killing it. If you see somebody cutting a tree, it's like cutting a part of you.
Yeah.
We're connected to the land. We're connected to everything there. We're connected to the stones. We're connected to the rocks. We're connected to the ocean. We're connected to the water. We come from there, and our also the connection to the land is our ancestors are all buried there. If you're an immigrant, you're a colonialist. You came from Europe. Most of them have passports from outside. There's a new generation now of Israelis who are born in Israel since 1940, since the occupation and the colonization. There's definitely generations that were born in Palestine, but they're still not taught ancestral connection or indigenous connection. They're connected to the biblical stories and the religious stories, and if they're atheist or the majority of the secular culture in Israel, they're not connected to the land itself. They're not. It's not like they have grandparents who are farmers. They're also very much capitalistic. So the cities, they're pretty much all about technology. There's no connection between them and the authenticity of the place. They try to steal identities. They try to steal things from our culture. They try to steal the food, Israeli hummus, and they steal the language. They steal whatever they can. Even the tatreez, like the Palestinian traditional embroidery. Now they're like, oh, we've been tarrizing since forever, and it's like, what kind? They have nothing, and if you have nothing, you try to steal everything around you in order to create a sense of identity. But their identity is not. And this is why we see immediately a genocide starts, a war starts, packing, and the airports are filled with Israelis traveling outside. They only come back when the war is over. There's no connection to and relation to the land. Look at Jabalia and the north of Gaza. They bombed them. They raped their men. They starved them to death. People were eating food, animal feed, and they still stayed in the land because they didn't want to leave it. Because it's where your grandparents were buried, it's where you were born. And if you are a refugee, it's also still your refugee camp. And they understand what being a refugee once means, that you will be a refugee again, and they refuse to leave. And if it wasn't for their steadfastness and their sumud in North Gaza, it would have completely gone. Yani, the relation we have, and at the moment the ceasefire was announced, the first thought that came to my mind was like, hey, I can go home. These places where we live, the countries that we visit, colonizers think that we would like to stay in America or to live in freezing cold Europe, in Berlin. The refugees are so happy to come to our countries. No, Habibi, we don't want to be in your countries. Nothing about your countries is anything close to what we have in our land, with its occupation, with the colonization, with the starvation, with the authoritarian regimes that stomp on our heads and necks and backs. Our land still has much more to offer. And if it didn't have much more to offer, then they wouldn't be coming to colonize us, to steal whatever resources and joy we have. And the Americans, they colonized and destroyed the first destruction and genocide of the Native Americans here. And they destroyed their land, and they made it void of any sanctity and emotions. Yani, if you go into any American city, it's like concrete jungles, no life, no. They don't. They've removed the soul from these places, and this is they live in cold, isolated, individualized societies, which no one wants to be in. So especially if you come from warm, not only warm temperature, but warm
Mm-hmm.
countries like ours,
Yeah.
these places have nothing to offer us.
Yeah, I relate to that because living here in London, I feel like after spending over a bit over 3 years here, it's like a part of me has slightly, whittled away.
Mm.
And it's only that whenever my parents come to visit or my family comes to visit, that I get a bit of that back. It's kind of like nourishing the soul, يعني rejuvenation, هيك شوية طاقة, like the energy you were talking about earlier. It's the warmth that comes from them that keeps me going because it this is not, yeah, we're not meant to be living in these places. We're only here because we're trying to seek a better life for ourselves. And it's it's in a forced manner as well. It's not something that we chose because of like this is something that we've always been thinking about. No, this is something that was forced upon us because of external forces. And on top of that, they make it even harder to not take this decision by just completely ruining our lands and our livelihoods in our own countries.
Yeah, especially London. I think I studied in London, and my sister for some reason, like, she's super adjusted to the UK.
Yeah,
And I used to tell her in Palestine, I was like, you and Palestine are not really very much in in a relationship, and she fits in the UK in some ways. But Anna, I went, and it was like impossible. I studied, and I got an offer to stay in BBC London, and I started, like, I did my internship there, and it was
yeah,
just insane. It was like being on a rat race, and I remember just seeing myself, and I'm like, every time I would wake up and go into the office, I'm like, oh my god, I'm a rat, I'm that rat, I'm that rat on the thing. You wake up, you run, and everybody's running in the street, so everybody has to run, and you get on the train, and it's like, push everyone, kill them, get on the train, get to the train.
Oh my
You know,
god.
like, get off, get into the work, and it's competition, competition, competition. And the white
yeah,
people are like so nasty in terms of like the chemistry of working. And then the only time you see them happy is when they're drunk in the bar, and then the second day in the morning they don't know you. This was the UK for me. I was like, this is the coldest place on earth, other than like the seasonal depression, because they don't even get the sun. It's like, and I was like, my mom was like, "Are you gonna come back?" I'm like, "Yani, I wanted to leave. I was like, I was going to either Sudan or Nepal to be a human shield." And my mother was like, "Yani, human shield, عنا. Come back to
yeah,
Palestine." I was like, "Yeah, man, I'll go back to Palestine. Yani, anything." But and I had run from Palestine because I was arrested. So it was like a choice between one prison or another.
mm,
لا يا عمي.
Oof.
Go back to what we know, because at least you're alive. There's life. There's something,
yeah,
you feel a sensation of being alive. Whereas in these places,
I mean, I know, right? And then something we learned from your documentary was that they can just take you, and for no reason, they can just pick you and say you're a prisoner. And nowadays, with the whole exchange of hostages, whatever prisoners, I just find it so wild how they always call, you know, Israelis as whatever hostages, and then
hostages,
Palestinians
terror.
they're terrorist prisoners. And
Yeah, the irony of
wow.
yesterday when they released the prisoners, they called them. I was watching Fox News, Allah يحرقهم, and it's like they're calling them terrorists. That's like women and children. You're calling terrorists. The kids, the 90 people who were released in the first stage are children. under the age of 18, and they're still calling them terrorists just to justify what Israel is doing. Yani there's this discrepancy, and this is how they look at us. They don't, and this is what I said in the film. We are not humans to them. We do not carry the identity of a human. So you can subjugate us, do whatever you want to us. We are not to their level. And as long as people are looking in this supremacy, you can't see. And it's the same here in the US. They treat the African Americans as second class, third class. The natives are savages. Kullo, they have this white supremacy that is beyond anything, and they look at anyone outside of the color, the creed, and the religion, خلاص, as a complete half human or animals, as the Israelis call us. وهلا you see يعني before Gaza, we used to say like يعني طب does the rest of the world know that they look at us like this? You know that do they realize? And then when Gaza happened, it's like yeah, the whole world sees that everybody's okay with it, they're fine with it, and they use the same caliber for everyone. It's the same way. يعني طب why is it okay for sovereign nations are not allowed to attack it? طب ما Lebanon is a sovereign state. Why was it okay for Israel to bomb inside of Beirut? Why is it okay to use the pager attacks, which is like the worst use of technological war and an advance in technological war that's going to take us into hell? How is that normal for pagers to be mutating children indiscriminate? كله إحنا, to us it's fine. God forbid if Russia uses a pager attack on the Ukrainians. Ya lahwi, the white people then. What would be the names? فهذا كله الhypocrisy, their masks, it's all completely يعني غزة liberated us from all these fake hypocrisies, and even giving the colonialists the doubt. وإحنا, I think our problem is we've been trying to please them all of our lives because of like inferiority complexes, because of like being under their colonialist boot. And we're like, oh, we should stick to the human rights. Hamas, oh, Hamas, the hostages that came out of the detentions from Hamas, it looks like they came out of a hair salon and a spa. They were given goodie bags when they were released. Our prisoners are being raped, and these little women walk out with their hairs braided, or nails done, with beautiful clothes, and because Hamas has to show that, look, we treated your prisoners like humans because we are human. We're trying so hard to explain to the world that even when we are, you're bombing, killing all of يعني, who are the men holding them and hostage? طب ما هن, they lost everything. Their entire family's bloodlines wiped out, and they were still treating these women with kindness. And the rest of the world doesn't care if Israel, يعني Khalida Jarrar lost half of her weight, could barely walk. We have children who have skin problems, have traumas for the rest of their lives. We have men who've been raped, women who have been sexually abused inside detention. There's images, videos coming out of these people perpetrating it, and Israeli society applauding, supporting the rapists, and calling for the rape to be legalized in their freaking parliament.
Right? So crazy.
وإحنا we're the savages and the terrorists. يعني it's very surreal that we have to live in these times.
Ashira, do you not think there's a change happening in the world where more people are waking up to this and becoming more aware of it? That's how I feel.
Definitely.
And I feel more prouder than ever to be Lebanese and to speak on these subjects. And I used to be more afraid to talk about these topics, but now, no, I'm fully proud of it, and proud of my culture, proud of being Lebanese, and I wanting to spread that to the world and wanting to support and strengthen our communities. I see the world is changing, and I see even my friends who are not Arab are becoming way more aware and way more expressive even about these things too than ever before. It's not there's no going back for the Israelis. after
Yeah.
what happened.
هلا هن people say like, oh, it's going to be terrible. I'm like, it's always been terrible for us.
Mm-hmm.
يعني Gaza was starving for 17 years. There's no water. They swim in sewage. In the sea's been like the first 6 meters that they're allowed to swim in, and they get shocked if they step foot into further than the 6 meters. Was all sewage. Our whole lives, 90% unemployment, living inside refugee camps, and people are saying, "Oh, but you know what Hamas did, and everything is bad for." No, since occupation, we have never had normal lives. But هلا Israel is definitely unmasked for the rest of the world. هلا those who wake up, I see much more people waking up. I see
Mm-hmm.
much more people aware of what is going on and understanding the situation. We see conservatives talking about Palestine. We see conservatives moving also
Yeah.
into like separation from
Mm-hmm.
Israel and wanting to distance themselves. This is happening. هلا the I feel that the the major shift command is that people, as you said, like people like you are now being proud to say like this is where we come from and this is how we are, and if there's a savage it's you and it's not me, and I don't have to hide who I am or what I do, and I don't have to hide that I support my resistance and I support our right to fight, because your international law, even though it only counts for white people, also gives me the right to resist when an external country is coming to occupy or come into my house. I can still,
Yeah.
people can, here in the US they use the stand, what's it called, stand your ground. If somebody comes to your house, you shoot them.
Yeah.
طب ما احنا they مش they came into our house, they came, they desecrated, they destroyed. These things, the shift is happening, and it's happening in a wide scale. But the reality of it is that on the ground, it is hell on earth for the Palestinians and for the Lebanese and for anyone who is around this and this entity. I don't know what they are anymore.
Mm-hmm. Can I can I ask you? Is it can you find empathy for, let's say, the colonizers? I think, watching your documentary, I was just reminded about the olive trees and how growing up in Lebanon, having olive oil and olives is the most delicious thing on the planet. All the fruits and vegetables in general is so good. And then living here in
And
Los
then you come to the
Angeles,
US and you're
I'm
eating
trying to,
plastic.
I'm eating plastic olive oil, and it's disgusting, to be honest. And I hope they don't.
Who best the plastic olive oil, petroleum in the candy. They poison their water. I don't know how these people are still alive.
I feel, a little bad for them.
I know, definitely. I know when I came here, I'm like, oh my god. When I give talks, I'm like, guys, don't drink your water. They're poisoning your water. There's like so much, and don't eat M&Ms. They have like poison everywhere. Everywhere you turn, they're poisoning them, and it's okay. It's legal to feed their people poison, and عادي they live. يعني I feel empathy, serious empathy for everyone who lives under colonialist regimes and they still don't think that they are living under occupation.
Mm.
يعني الحمد لله we have like a physical occupation that comes and shows it, because the Palestinians then we're like, oh, we know that we are occupied.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the world, they don't know that they're colonized. They don't know that their medicine is not medicine. They don't know that the food they're eating is not food. In London, my God, I was a vegetarian in Palestine and I never had any issues. My blood was very perfect. Everything was like, I go to London, I turn, like, I continue being a vegetarian for 2 years and my blood dropped. Everything collapsed. I was like, what's going on? Like, it's not, my food changed. There isn't like the basic hummus every day. But I was trying to solidify, like use vegetables, and their vegetables were not vegetables when I actually figured it out. Like I understood that I was just eating water, and that if you want to eat healthy, you have to pay tons of dollars. So also the food is only for the rich, and it's like هدول الناس, they don't. These people don't know that they're occupied. They don't know that they're
Yeah.
living in horrific conditions, and they're sending their money to the country which one of the best healthcares, whether I like
I
it or
know,
not,
right?
is in Israel. It's a socialist state which takes care of the people. So it's like the only in the U.S. here, if you pinch your finger, you have to think twice. People don't fix their teeth because of how expensive it is. It's like they live in prisons here. For my colonizer, for the Israelis, do I feel empathy? Or, of course, I feel empathy. I feel empathy because they are also very much occupied, and I believe full-heartedly that the reason why the Israelis are perpetrating these crimes is because Europe and America want to hold them hostage for not until today. They, since the Holocaust, the Israelis never had a chance to wake up. They gave them guns, loaded them on buses, and still shipped them out of Europe. Yani Hitler wanted to kill them. The Americans and the Europeans wanted to get rid of them, but they said, "Ah, yalla, give them Palestine and get rid of them all.
I know, right?
Ship them all." And they shipped them to Palestine, and they started. And the Israelis had from day one to fight.
Yeah.
And I think, yani, the biggest tragedy is that they put us against each other. And instead of actually having the Jews heal from their trauma, go back to their houses, which they were kicked out of in Europe, they never gave them reprimands for what has been done to them. They shipped them into another war and kept them in a state of fight. And in a state of fear, you can do anything to people. These people have been in fear for decades. And Israeli state, the regime itself, which has nothing to do with Judaism, uses Judaism as an anti-Semitism as a tool, and holds the Holocaust against them and pinches them the whole time, like, see, the Palestinians want to kill you. And if there wasn't a conflict, they create a conflict so that they can stay in a war. War is how they thrive, and war is what they live on. Yani October 7th was the greatest gift to Netanyahu. It's like, see, they want to kill you. And they used it and drummed the rolls around the world that they still want to kill us. La, 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 see. And they use it. They use this fear in order to control their whole entire population. Israelis don't know many languages. They only know Hebrew. They're not very well educated. The ones who are educated secular immediately leave when war comes up, and they pretend to be okay, lefty, and oh no, don't kill them all. Yani, keep them in lockdown. Keep them in little cages and give them a little bit of the West Bank. Yeah, yeah, and that's the lefty. Whereas the right wing, only Hebrew speaking, haven't left that land. They only receive media from the Israeli regime, and they're in under their grip fully and fully. they're they're perpetrating evil, and there's no way out for them.
On the topic of ruling with fear, we've seen, for example, in Middle Eastern countries, that regimes that are ruling with fear don't always last.
Giranko,
Uh,
your neighbor.
Yep.
And it took a very long time to topple them. It took
it
extremely
did,
long.
yeah. but the thing is, they do get toppled, and how come this hasn't been the case yet in Israel, for example? Like,
Because
why
Israel is
do they still
the
accept to
is
live
a
in fear?
it's a state within the United States. It's Israel. It's the U.S.'s extended arm.
Mm.
And it the presence of Israel is the U.S. mandate, and it's a European mandate. This is how they control the rest of the colonies around them. They need it. It's still a problem of the Americans and the Europeans, not an actual state of Israel. Yani, had Israel had the U.S. And the Jordanians didn't and the British didn't help Israel in this war, they wouldn't have survived. With the Yemenis cutting them off the main supplies, it was Dubai and Jordan that allowed for the trucks of food to arrive into Israel during the war. If it wasn't
Mm.
for the American Air Force, British Air Force, and the alliance that stopped the bombs from Iran coming into Israel, they would have been hit very hard. This regime is nothing without its allies. They exist on bombs. All of the bombs that were dropped in Gaza are made in the US.
Mm-hmm.
They saved them with billions so that the US can have its main ally, and it's like a base. It's a US base in the middle of the heart of the Middle East. So that's the reason. هلا احنا the Arab regimes trying to get rid of them. وبرضه Assad did not fall if it wasn't for an alliance that came from outside to get rid of him يعني.
Yeah,
There's
that's very true.
يعني Mubarak fell, they created a Sisi for us. It's they're in control and they have the money and they have the power, and sadly we are controlled by puppets يعني. We have Abu Mazen, we have a Vichy government within the Palestinian within the Palestinian land that controls our land and is still oppressing us, and we're not able to get rid of of Fatah and the Palestinian Authority. So it's the outside that controls what happens in our countries and what leadership. But Israel will be resolved. It's just a matter of when it becomes such a heavy burden for the Americans and the Europeans to pay for it. Once it becomes morally and ethically, and already morally and ethically they're getting there.
Mm-hmm.
Financially, when becomes a financial burden, which I think also this war was a financial burden, and I think this is also why Israel accepted the ceasefire now, because they're like, okay, Trump is not going to give us billions,
It's so true.
just like the Biden administration did. So let's take it easy. And they did get a massive hit economically from the BDS, from the Yemenis. The economy in Israel was hit horrifically. So now they're like trying. Now they're gonna start rebuilding. But it's just a matter of time. There's no evil force on earth that can continue to exist, especially after what they have done now.
Mhm. And I wanted to ask your opinion on how some of the Gulf countries have normalized their ties with Israel. And I see your reaction, and yeah, Uh, is this is this helpful? I mean, obviously not from, but at the same time, can it maybe lead to a different avenue of like dealing with the dealing with Israel?
يعني هدول النورماليزيشن تبع دبي ولا all the countries that are Israel want the concept of a greater Israel is not doesn't mean physical dominance on
Mm.
territory. It is
Mm,
also dominance of authorities that are close to it. So they have control
Wow.
over Jordan, they have control over Egypt, and they have control over Dubai. They're now getting control over Saudi, which is the big deal for them, because
yeah,
historically the promised land, if you look also biblically where Moses crossed, he didn't cross into Palestine. The river, the sea that opened was the Red Sea, and they went into Saudi. So
yeah,
there's historically a connection between the Jews and Saudi Arabia.
okay,
So their biblical return to all of this land is the dream of Israel. So whether they do it by force or whether they do it by diplomacy. And this is what the US wants. It is that Israel is in control of all of these areas. It's in control of Saudi, it's in control of Dubai, it's in control of all of the Gulf and the Middle East.
Wow.
Well, that's how you have an empire. They are empires that are coming back. What's happened in Syria also is scary, because Israel is now going to go into Syria. They've already went into
Mm-hmm.
Syrian lands. They're taking even greater land. And what it
yeah,
means, what they don't want Syrian territory. The Israelis are not looking for physical territory to take over. Syria is water. Syria is cutting the pie of the water between Turkey and Israel, because they know that the droughts are just going to get worse and worse and worse, and they need to supply their water supply. And to ensure that Tiberias Lake is always going to have fresh water coming in, to cut the supply for Jordan and to keep them surviving on whatever they need. So it's control of all these resources. So that's the Jewish dream, and that's assisted by the Europeans and the Americans, and that's what they wish and desire. هلا Alhamdulillah, we still have allies and we still have resistance. وكمان when you talk about biblical and biblically the story, because this is at the end of the day not also it's not just a battle, a political battle. There's also the battle of biblical wars and the prophecies of what will happen on this land. فكمان the split between the Shia and the Sunni is very important in the dynamics of how this war is being seen, and how also the unveiling of the Sunni is happening. Yani, even though the Palestinians majority are Sunni, who came to our aid?
The Shiites.
The Shiites were the ones who came to the aid. If you look at the biblical war of what will happen also when with the return of the Mahdi, the whole biblical story of the Messiah, of all of this, it's also very much, we're getting to that space where like, okay, so the Sunni alliance is actually an American alliance, it's an Israeli alliance, this is what's happening on the on the ground. The awakening of people also in the Islamic world to what to how the religion, the Sunni religion, or the religion has been occupied by these authorities, and how it has been changed and what has been happening. There's a return to the there's a return also now to understanding what happened and why there's a split between the Sunni and the Shia. Many of the Sunnis are asking questions because they were like, okay, listen, there's something very wrong in this religion if the aspect of jihad and protecting the Al-Aqsa and protecting the people under war is not something that they're doing in Saudi, and it's not what Jordan is doing. What the majority of the Sunni countries are completely in support of the Zionist state, then it's opening questions for the Palestinians, for also other people who support the resistance, and they have to sit and ask questions. So there's an awakening that is happening on all terms,
Mm-hmm.
on all levels, for all of us,
So much is changing.
which
Mm-hmm.
so much is changing and shifting. I think also
Mm-hmm.
that we're just going to see an acceleration of this shift and how people are going to change, and things on the ground will eventually change. Yani it's ordained.
It's happening as we speak.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about being a journalist in Palestine. I mean, we hear so much about how horrible the Zionist entity is to journalists in Palestine, killing so many of them. And then your experience and you going to the Maskubiya, and um, what's it like being? Is that why you're not there right now, or what's
Yani,
the story?
so
Yeah.
yani the detention and the stories of my arrest and what I experienced, they're in the film, and I recommend
Mm-hmm.
people to go and watch Where the Olive Trees Weep. But in terms of how they treat journalists, yani we've seen it in this war. What's been happening to the journalists? The journalists have been the target of Israel for assassinations. Their families were killed, and directly. Yani it wasn't like a lie. It's like either you stop reporting in North Gaza or we kill you and kill your family. 2 days later, they would kill their families and they would kill them. And Israel is silencing any kind of media from coming out. They're going after foreign journalists. They're going after local journalists. Palestinian Authority is also going after those journalists in the West Bank. Journalists are being tortured. It's silencing any kind of voices and images that come out. Al Jazeera is blocked by the Palestinian Authority and by Israel
Oh, wow.
because it was reporting on this genocide. Foreign media, if they are allowed to enter the West Bank, they are under the control of the Israeli government press office. Being a journalist in Palestine is it's extremely difficult, and if you're a Palestinian, it's even worse because you're not a journalist in the eye of the Israelis. There's no, and they don't have the sanctity or respect for journalists and protection. It doesn't exist. All of the rules of laws of war and protecting journalists, medics, everything, this does not exist. And we've been saying this for centuries. Israel doesn't care. If you're a journalist hospital, they would shoot it. Halla, the world got to see how they burned the entire hospitals down. And they couldn't find any evidence in these hospitals of any reason. And how it was a direct attempt to get people to be ethnically cleansed from the north of Gaza was to get rid of all the hospitals so that they can the people won't have any place to heal, so that they will all have to run. Israel doesn't hold anything sacred. There's no protection for anyone. And the Palestinian Authority does not protect journalists or care about the coverage. So it's like being silenced and pinned all the time, and you have to worry all the time about what you're gonna say, who you're gonna say. You have like a little soldier in your mind. And this is why I left, because I couldn't speak about the genocide whatsoever, not from the Palestinian Authority and not from the Israeli authorities. And when we released the film, I was like, يعني if the Israelis get see this, I will be able, I might be under risk from the Israelis, so I prefer to be outside. And I needed to speak about the genocide because I would have popped from the inside. يعني. And when we talk about trauma and we talk about illness, if I kept myself quiet, I would have exploded. I couldn't.
Wow. So you saying us talking about this right now in a way is our form of healing from all the trauma inflicted on us.
Yes, yes. And for me, it's the ability of coming out and being able to speak and to say what is happening to my people, to be able to shout in the streets, to be able to face Israelis, and to be able to awaken people is liberating for me physically, emotionally. I couldn't be able. It's so hard for people in the West Bank, and when I talk to my fellow journalists who are still there on the ground, they risk everything for being able to speak. They
Mm-hmm.
risk everything for writing a tweet. They risk
Mm-hmm.
everything for posting, and all the time you have to constantly. And I remember I woke up at some point during the genocide at 3 a.m. and I was pregnant, and I had a nightmare about being arrested while I was pregnant, and it was all because I had posted something about Gaza, and I was so terrified at night that they will come and take me. That I was like, okay, Ashira, خلاص, يعني it's getting to you fully, and so I shut down my Instagram and I was like, I'll go and be active on the ground instead of having to report, so that I can be safe until I can get out. بس يعني people are faced with this every single day, and that's why you don't get media from outside. When هلا the Palestinian Authority was starving Jenin refugee camp, and
Mm-hmm.
there was only one journalist, Mariam Barghouthi, Allah يحميها. She was the only one who was speaking, and I think another foreign journalist, and that was it. No one was reporting on what was going on in Jenin. The Palestinian media, no one. And I remember even during the second Intifada, when Hamas won the elections and خلص it became clear that the Palestinian Authority was going to take the Hamas out in the West Bank, we were invited, and it was Ramadan, and we were invited as journalists to a dinner with the head of the security forces for Ramadan. And I was like, okay, why not? We can go. Let's see. And we're all sat there, and in the middle of it, he takes out his gun, puts it on the table, and points at all of us. And he's like, in the coming days, this is the only thing that will be talking. And he puts it on the table, and he's like, even if you are journalists, um, what you will say will affect what will happen to us. So if you say something that is against the Palestinian Authority, you will also be treated as an enemy. And the journalists, we had the Naqib, the union, the head of the union, with us, being threatened by the Palestinian Authority. Two days later, a Palestinian a sheikh of one of the mosques in a place in Ramallah was hung inside the mosque by the Palestinian security forces, and not one media outlet in Palestine reported, because we had dinner before and we knew then what he was talking about. Um, so it's you risk everything. For me, doing reports about the Palestinian Authority, and I reported on the electronic laws
Mm.
that was used, a law that the Palestinian Authority. I was taken, threatened. They threatened to kidnap my mother and kill her. They threatened to target me physically. For reporting on torture by the Palestinian Authority to our prisoners, I was taken, beaten, and beaten up by the Palestinians. So you hear the story in the film about how I was attacked by soldiers and they lynched me. A year after that, I was taken by the Palestinian Authority and beaten
Oof.
because I reported on that. When I had to leave when I was working with Amnesty, I was exiled from Palestine, and I took refuge in the UK because I was under threat, because I uncovered extrajudicial killings by the Palestinian Authority. And I was threatened by both the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli Authority at the same time. So it's being a voice there and trying to share the truth with people has a price. Um, and there's
Mhm.
no such thing as freedom of speech. No, nowhere in the world there's freedom of speech. Yeah.
But we need it.
Sounds like for
We need the
يعني
yeah.
الحمد لله we
expression.
have podcasts. الحمد لله we have some leeway and some like I'm shadow banned on social media. Like you can't find me on Instagram. You have to like write and search specifically. They try to still silence us on social media. Why TikTok is gone in the US.
Hmm.
Every outlet for expression is being targeted.
Um, we need your voice and Palestinian voices, and we need all of us to speak because they're trying to erase us. They're trying to make us not exist. You know, some people say Palestinians don't even exist. There's no such thing as a Palestinian. That's what some Zionists say, and I find that so crazy to believe. You know, and then um, how do people actually believe that? But then, thanks to your work, you know, in terms of not you but Palestinians in general, with the music they put out, the culture they put out, the films, the journalists, the all the beautiful things that come out of there prove that it does exist. Obviously, that's why it's so necessary.
Yeah, I think these are our outlets, Hani, and it's even art is persecuted
Hmm.
over there. But it's very important for us to show that we are still here in and to represent. Uh, there are allies, there are allies, there are ways to get our voices out there. There are people who support. There are people waking up, and I think the idea is to always create spaces where we are able to speak and to be able to raise our voices for what is going on. It's and people find a way. The light always finds a way to go in between the cracks.
I believe that.
And
Hmm.
yeah,
What about trauma? Uh, how do you heal from it? Um, I mean, you've worked with people trying to heal them, work with them.
so
How much?
for the main thing for trauma to understand it is to understand that it happens to your body.
Hmm.
It happens within you, and it doesn't happen outside of you. And to understand that we are humans that are very much linked and connected to each other. We're tribal. Colonialism and the whole Western modality also doesn't deal with the tribe and the community and the energy of the collective.
Yeah.
فwe heal also collectively. Yani the Palestinian trauma is not an individualized trauma that you can go and deal with one thing. We will all collectively heal if Palestine is liberated. And I've seen it yesterday with the scenes of the ceasefire and people going home. The collective trauma is the liberation.
Hmm.
The people who were still, despite being having lost entire families, were still dancing in the streets of Gaza when they went home to their destroyed houses, and having the community come together uh, is very important for us. Well, the way that colonialists work is they destroy tribes, because if we are connected, we are stronger, then we can fight them together
Hmm.
collectively. And this is the whole divide and conquer. They not only divide us and conquer us for geographically, but they also come into the nuclear family and try to disrupt and dissociate us from our relatives and our connections. From my experience working with Palestinians, and not only Palestinians, but people who come from indigenous black, brown bodies, who have experienced ongoing trauma, it is in coming into groups, into finding spaces where we can come together as a collective and dealing with our trauma collectively, being heard, being seen from other people, and from dealing with the body as a tool to release the trauma. And understanding احنا just as intergenerationally we take um, we inherit trauma from our grandparents, we inherit ways of resilience and ways of sumud.
Hmm.
And the idea when you talked about zayt zatoon,
Hmm.
immediately my palate, like my lips are
Hmm.
tingling, and I'm like, I have to
I know,
get some
right?
zatoon.
Hmm.
There are things that are connected to our culture. And if you look at all indigenous cultures, music and sound is the first thing.
Wow.
When we are in funerals, when there is death, we are singing. When there is joy, we are singing and chanting. There's always, our things are always collective. You don't feel your pain isolated and alone in a room. um, you don't, coming into the community is where we heal together. هلا talk therapy, احنا we don't need talk therapy. هينا we're sitting together right now,
Mm-hmm.
we talk. I tell you my whole story without, I tell people in the, for the Arabs and the Palestinians and the indigenous, in the taxi drive from one place to another, you talk to your therapist to your taxi driver more than you talk to the therapist. And even in the West, this is where we get isolated in the
Yeah.
West, and I have trauma when I'm around Europe and America, because we don't have that. This is why they need talk therapy. They need someone to pay someone money
I
to
know,
sit
right?
with, to listen. But احنا we don't.
You have friends and family.
We have friends, we have
Yeah.
family, we have that release of the verbal. هلا the non-verbal trauma, which is stuck in our bodies, which is our fight flight response, which is our anger, our aggression, which is also our fear responses, our amygdala, our hormonal responses, which are pretty much in the body. For those, we need to release through body work. We need to release through going into the trauma and releasing it from there. We also have faith, and faith plays a very big role in trauma. And in your ability to withstand, uh, especially like the genocide. People are like, oh my God, how are these Ghazawis saying Alhamdulillah? Alhamdulillah, because we believe in an afterlife. For us, life doesn't end. We're not all physical.
Mm-hmm.
After the physical, there's a spiritual, and we go back into the spiritual. So there's a never-ending cycle. So death doesn't scare us the same way as for the West. It's like, oh my God, like they've lost everything and they're still able. Halla, it hurts, it burns, there's grief. Grief also we do in ceremony. We grieve in ceremony, we grieve together. I love how the Shia have the ceremony where they come together and they grieve, and they release vocally
Mm-hmm.
all the emotions. Ihna,
Yeah.
we don't have that, sadly. We're not allowed to do very much verbal, and we're told that we're not allowed to cry. You don't have to like hold on to all the pain. But it is so soothing and so healing to be able to wail, and to wail in a collective, and to have everybody share that pain together, and to bring it out and to release it verbally from the body. There's so many different ways. Ihna, we do dabke, and we do dancing for
Mm-hmm.
ceremonies, and we also release a lot of the energy that's stuck in our bodies through that.
Yeah.
We release that in the Latmiyat, the way that you have in the Shia where they're sitting. All of the places that the Shia hit is very much connected to where we do the tapping for acupuncture, where we do the tapping points for
Mm.
releasing from trauma, from the Indian to the Sikh to the. It's very much about activating the body, and the body becomes a vessel for spiritual release and for emotional release. When we do it in Sufism, when we are whirling and spinning with the earth, our amygdala, and I proved this like
Mm-hmm.
scientifically, there's electricity going from the brain, and the brain is changing. These are the things that make us strong. These are the things that are inherent to us. And we are not meant to resolve our trauma separately. And we are not meant to think that our problems are individualized. People who suffer from addictions, people who suffer from uh, alcohol abuse,
Mm-hmm.
whatever kind of addictions, it's not an individualized issue. It comes from a home of trauma. It's self medication because there is sadness and grief, and the sadness and grief might not be just because somebody has an issue personally, but it's for why is it that the majority of native black and brown bodies have suffer problems with addiction? It's not because we are inherently have a disease and a liking and like a likelihood to be or genetically predisposed to have the addictions. It's also because we've experienced trauma, our grandparents have experienced trauma, and the trauma is ongoing because there's racism, there's discrimination, there is colonialism, and they try to pin it as an individual problem. انت يعني روح solve your problem, go get pills. You have, they take people if they have bipolar dissociations,
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of labels that they put on people. And if you come down to it, it can be things that happen from specifically from collective intergenerational trauma. But if they deal with if they accept that, then they will accept responsibility for colonization, for what the society is, for the illnesses, for the isolation. Why did that millions of people need support in COVID? What happened? Like mental health became the biggest hit
Mm-hmm.
after COVID because they realized that they're living in isolation. That the moment you disconnect them, then they have to sit and realize that there's real problems happening within the societies and the individualization of the societies and the separation.
So was like COVID like a wake up call then, based on
Yeah,
what
yeah, yeah.
you
It was definitely like a wake up call, and the problem, the after effect of COVID, of the isolation of people, was that there was much more trauma because isolation and
Mhm.
separation creates more trauma.
But this culture of like isolationism isn't a recent trend. How how did it start? Why is it still ongoing? Um, why haven't Western countries changed the aspects of it? You know, try to incorporate a bit of not necessarily tribalism, but aspects of it into their
Community.
ما
communities.
هن
Mm-hmm.
لأنه that's what they fought. They labeled tribalism as savagery. They labeled collective trauma. They labeled witches in Europe because they were doing medicine and healing. They labeled them as witches and put them on the stakes. They labeled the medicine men as heresy. يعني it comes from the need to dominate people
Mm-hmm.
and the
Yeah.
need for people to be in control, and control means isolation, separation. And if for you to be able to take people into wars and take children into wars, then you're separating the identity and the tribe. وهلا يعني the Americans have been telling the whole story of the Indian and the American, is that these savages, they were sitting and running around the fire and the hoo hoo hoo, and we were shown that in all of the Hollywood movies. For them to come out now and say, oh well, actually this is the best medicine for the soul, and what these natives had is the original thing, and what they've had in sitting in circle
Right.
protecting the tribe, protecting the community, they were not really savages. Actually, they were more civilized than we have ever been.
Ah.
And the actual savages are the ones who murder, create weapons of mass destruction, colonize, occupy, use fear. It stands completely against what they are
It's
and who they
so
are.
ironic and hypocritical. It would be funny if it wasn't so horrifying, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Um, my last question for you is, what do you think about the future of Palestine? What does Palestinian liberation mean for you?
I'll say what it means for me in the vision.
Mm-hmm.
The vision is you and me can meet
I would
in
love that.
Palestine.
Yeah.
That we have a country, that we remove the borders that were set to us by the colonizers, and that we all live without these fake boundaries and borders. And then we will also have to let go of the flags, everything that identifies us as and separates us. Because at the end of the day, we are one huge tribe that speaks the same language, that eats the same warat dawali, that eats the same tabbouleh, probably much better on the northern side in Lebanon than on the.
I'll take it.
But we will give you jamid. We have some magic also. We have the dried yogurt and the desert kind of food that you need. But there's
Thank you for that.
the dream is that those who fought with us will celebrate with us, and that those who are with us in people who want to live as humans, who respect the sanctity of life, are allowed to have access. The Holy Land is a holy land. There is so much beauty and magic in Jerusalem that there isn't in anywhere else in the world. And it should be a home that for everyone, a place of homage for anyone, not only of the three religions. Anyone who wants needs to have access to that piece of beauty. And but yeah, for that to happen, the occupation needs to completely end from the river to the sea, and the Zionist entity needs to be dismantled, and colonization needs to be dismantled, and also the Arab authoritarian regimes need to be dismantled so that we can actually have unity. And with that comes also the acceptance of humans as we are, with all of our differences, to have a space where people are accepted who they are for whatever they are, whichever reign they come from. And the respect, I think that is inherent also in the ancestral knowledge and in the indigenous faith, without the interruption and the interference of those who want to make money out of us. So inshallah, and I see Palestine closer to freedom today than it ever was, even with everything that is happening. I know that Palestine is
Hmm.
closer to freedom, and that the Zionist entity, and it's like the last stages of the empire before it falls. They fight with everything they have to maintain their identity. You have like Elon Musk, High Hitler
Yeah, I
style.
mean,
You
so
have
true.
you have the wild madness coming around the earth, and it's like having the rat in the corner, and he has to give everything because he knows khalas, he's cornered, there's nowhere to go. So let them do this last burst of evil. The light is coming, and it's coming faster, and with much more beauty, from everywhere in the world.
Inshallah, inshallah, your words come true, and hopefully sooner than expected. Um,
Inshallah.
Ash- Ashira, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and sharing all of your insight and all of your information. Where can people access the documentary, and how can people get in touch with you? We know you're shadow
So we
banned,
have
but
the website
Hmm.
where the olive trees where the olive trees weep.com, so you can watch the movie for free, or you can donate to the project that science and non-duality are supporting in Palestine. And for my I have a website which is uh, Ashira Premrachana.
Hmm.
Ashira Premrachana. And for my Instagram, it's Prem Ashira. And yeah, I'm shadow banned. You're gonna have to look hard, but you'll find me at the end.
We'll link you. Wonderful.
Link me, share. And yeah,
all right,
and if you're
Ashira.
in the Bay Area, I'm also doing workshops and work in the Bay.
Okay, wonderful.
Perfect. We salute to cover the camera. Ashira, if you want, you can join us. Thank you guys for watching, and peace.
Ciao.